Washington Journal continues.
As we continue on this Monday morning, our guest is Frank Llewellyn of the Democratic Socialists of America. Good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell us about your organization.
The Democratic Socialists of America is a political organization, not a political party, as I'm sure most people think. We don't run candidates. We do support candidates. We have about 10,000 members. Our members live in every state. We have organizations in 50 communities and 25 campuses. We have a vision of socialism that is democratic, that's based on equitable distribution of resources, meaningful work, a healthy environment, sustainable growth, gender and racial equality, non-oppressive relationships. And we work on issues, political campaigns, we educate, we organize.
You brought along this pin, and I want to ask you the symbolism behind it, a rose and a handshake.
Well, it's actually something we do a lot. It's an adaptation of a European symbol. I believe it was the French Party's Socialist Youth originally adopted the fist and a rose, which is sort of being militantly for, peace, justice, and equality. And we adopted that, and then later on we transformed that, adding the traditional American hands clasped in racial solidarity.
As you know, on this program we've had a number of callers who have referred to your organization. You said that you have 10,000 members. Mm-hmm. Are there regular chapters, annual meetings, dues-paying members? How does it all work?
Our members join by paying dues. They're organized into, for the most part, geographic entities, but we have some other commissions. We have a youth group. We are governed by an annual convention that delegates are elected to, and they elect a leadership. Our next convention is this November, the 12th through the 14th. It's going to be in San Diego, California. And I'd invite anybody in San Diego who wants to learn about us to stop by and, see something.
Honorary chairs include Gloria Steinman, Cornel West, Vice Chair, former Congressman Ron Dellums. Who else is involved? Well,
there are lots of people who are members. John Sweeney is a member. There are lots of members on campus, in the academy. Lots of people who work in the trade union movement. People, authors like Francis Fox Piven, who is a vice chair of the organization. So we have a wide variety of members.
We welcome your phone calls. 202-624-1111 is our liberal line. 202-624-1115 for conservatives, and 202-737-6734 is our moderate line. Our guest is Frank Llewellyn. Our first call is from New York. Good morning.
Yes, I'm calling from New York City. I'm calling because Frank seems to have forgotten that the Democratic Socialists of America do not believe in property rights, private property rights in the United States. And also for the American people...
Why do you bring that up?
Excuse me?
Why do you bring that up, caller? Why that specific point?
Why that specific point? Well, recently I was reading an article by Phyllis Schlafly, and Bill Clinton seems to be signing... I think he's signed about 297 executive orders since he's been president. Mm-hmm. One of these executive orders that he's trying to get through, or that has been brought to the attention, but no media seems to report it, is that one would include economic rights, which refuse to recognize private property rights, and they would use it through one of the UN treaties, make it valid through one of the UN treaties.
Frank Llewellyn?
Well, there's an awful lot there. it's certainly not true that we don't think that people can own property. There's nothing that we've ever said that would indicate that. It is true that we think that human rights are more important than property rights, and it is true that we believe that we need to constrain the way in which corporations direct the market and put limits on markets. But the idea that, we want to prevent somebody from owning their own home or car is just foolish.
Frank Llewellyn was born in Brockton, Massachusetts, grew up in upstate New York, the town of Ithaca, graduate of the SUNY system in New York, and lives where right now?
I live in Brooklyn.
We're going to call from Paris, Illinois. Good morning.
Good morning. I have a question for Mr. Llewellyn. And the question is, first of all, I've been spending considerable time taping the Third Way presentation by Anthony Giddens, director of London School of Economics, as well as the Democratic Leadership Council, the Third Way into the 21st century. And I would like to hear the guests' comments concerning the connection of the Democratic Socialists of America to the particular approaches espoused by Mr. Giddens and the panel on the Democratic Leadership Council.
Well, I'm not really familiar with the exact program that you're talking about, but I am familiar with the Democratic Leadership Council. That's a political group that has sought to bring the Democratic Party to the center, and that's not the political direction that we're interested in promoting. We would rarely support somebody that they did, for example.
Next call is King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to ask a sequence of questions.
How about if we take it one at a time with a response?
Related, and
Sure.
The first one is obvious. Does the Democratic Socialist of America group endorse the free press?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, do they also endorse the idea that the state would have control over the means of production?
Well, we think that that there should be public control of the economy. That doesn't mean that the state has to control every aspect of it. Most socialists now believe that market mechanisms of some kind have to be a part of a modern economy. So, we don't have a blueprint that's going to precisely say, well, how everything is going to turn out. We're a movement in transition. But the idea, the old model of where everything is centralized and run by some bureaucratic institution is not what we believe in at all.
Did you have
a little more concrete?
Pardon me, caller?
Hello?
Yes. Did you have a follow-up?
Yes. In the event that there's a great deal of public participation in the management of industry, do you suppose that an organization which was opposed to socialism would be able to buy a printing press?
Yes. I mean, politics doesn't end. I mean, we're not about, we're about democracy and about convincing people and changing minds. So politics isn't going to end, when socialism is achieved. There's still going to be disputes. So we believe in a free press. We're not, and we believe in politics, and we would not want to be part of a model that didn't believe in that.
In your preamble, you say we are socialists because we reject an international economic order sustained by private profit. What do you mean by that?
Well, it means that most of the benefits of the economy of the world accrue to a very small group of people. We want to change that. We want to make the benefits of the economy accrue to a much larger group of people, particularly the people who are engaged in work to make the economy grow.
So So when a private businessman says, I take my profits, hypothetically, and says that I'm going to turn these profits into new equipment, new research, new ideas, new jobs, what do you tell them?
Well, some of that does happen. We do have economic growth, but we also have extraordinary concentrations of wealth and income and power. I mean, if you think, for example, in 1965, the average ratio between a chief executive officer's pay and a production worker's pay was about 20 to 1. Now, the most conservative estimate I've seen is that it's 116 to 1, and I've seen other estimates that it's as high as 257 to 1. Now, a society, with that kind of disparity in wealth and income and power is not going to be a healthy society.
You also say that here in the U.S. we must fight for a humane public policy that will provide quality health care for everyone. Do you support nationalized health care?
We support a national health care system. The model that we support is what's called a single-payer model, in which basically everybody gets a card and they go to the doctor, and their health care is between them and their doctor, and the government does what it does best. It writes a check and pays for it.
Our guest this morning is Frank Llewellyn of the Democratic Socialists of America. He is one of their party committee members and also taking on a few extra duties these last couple of months. We'll get a call from Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Good morning.
Good morning. Unfortunately, you covered most of my question already, but I'll ask it anyway.
Certainly.
Mr. Lewis, sir, how would you describe your party's view of economic policies? I mean, I guess you've answered. You're basically looking at a command-type socialistic economy. I mean, that was my question. I guess, what do you think of the free market? I mean, it strikes me that capitalism in America, the America-type capitalism, I mean, not only is it, making $1 trillion a year, and it's, crushed the, command system of the Russia. I mean, this equalization that you're suggesting seems to me had been already tried from 1917 until, I guess 1989. It was a failure. I mean, obviously, socialism is an interesting thought, but, you need a form of capitalistic economy policies. But that's my thought. How would, what do you think of that? Is that...
Well, the first thing I would say is, I would disagree with the proposition that socialism has been tried. What you had in the Soviet Union, doesn't comport in any way to what we believe. We believe you can't have socialism without democracy. We don't believe in a model of the economy that is command-oriented, in which you have some small committee at the top make decisions that affects everybody. We think that that's not the way it should be or the way it will be. I mentioned earlier that nearly every socialist movement that is in government works with markets in some way or another. And if you look at Europe right now, and they're doing pretty well, the governments of 15 of the 19 NATO powers are run by the Socialist Party in that country, or they're in the government in some capacity. So I think that your view of what we believe is simply incorrect.
Let me just tick off a couple of items that you list in what is the DSA's progressive agenda. Among the things that you're calling for: make college loans available to all, establish a federal jobs bank, initiate a massive public works program, rebuilding our infrastructure, building affordable housing, providing jobs, invest funds in new high-tech civilian industries, provide funds for drug treatment on demand, place community-based directors on the boards of S&Ls or banks which require federal assistance, create a favorable environment and fair procedures for union organizing, ban striker replacement, and discourage super high executive salaries. How do you pay for all this?
Taxes. I mean, this country has a myth that it's taxed at a high rate, and in fact, one of the interesting things is if people talk about the good old days of in the 1950s and the economic expansion there and before everything got bad. Well, the tax rates then were much higher, particularly on corporations. We think that there is plenty of wealth available to pay for the programs.
Our next call from Raleigh, North Carolina. Good morning.
Good morning. And I appreciate C-SPAN having this gentleman on. I've been hearing about this organization, about the number of members of the House of Representatives and senators who belong to this group.
And because a number of you have called in, that's why we've invited him, so we appreciate that.
Could you tell us exactly how many members of the House of Representatives belong to your socialist group and how many members of the Senate? And can we get a list either through C-SPAN or through your organization that will give us the names of our elected representatives who belong to your organization?
Thank you, caller.
Well, the answer to that is not many. This is one of the great myths that has been, spread by people on the right. That 50-something, that 51 members of the House, and I haven't heard a number for the Senate are members of our organization. If that were true, politics would be quite different in this country. We do work with elected officials, and we do work with members of the House, and occasionally we work with people in the Senate. There are no members of the Senate who are DSA members, and I think only 2 people in the House. So this is really...
Those 2 in the House are?
That would be, Danny Davis in Chicago and Major Owens in New York. We have never judged our strength by the number of elected officials that we can associate with or work with. Ron Dellums was on our letterhead because he was a spokesperson for a whole set of politics. And for a long time, he was the only person who was in Congress who could have that role. And frankly, neither Danny Davis nor Major Owens would be considered somebody who could speak for this organization, and they're not a bloc. So this is one of the great ironies, the fact that in response to the right's destruction of the old caucus system in the House, that a group of members came together around a very modest agenda called the Fairness Agenda, that over 400 organizations are supporting. And then the people on the right pick out us to try to bait the program. It's just a joke and is not going to work because the American people know that the Cold War is over. They know that these issues aren't important.
4 other things that are part of the Democratic Socialists of America agenda. By the way, do you have a website?
We do have a website, and I encourage everybody to look at the website, to visit it, to email inquiries to it, and you can get more information. You can download our position papers on that. It's actually been updated since the version that's on your screen. And you can also call our office. The office opens at 9. That's 212-727-8610. And operators are standing by.
4 other points to give you a sense of the agenda of this organization. They're calling for a portion of profits from banks and S&L's capital to be set aside for affordable housing. You're calling for raising the minimum wage. You're calling for passing of a federal lesbian and gay civil rights bill and reducing defense spending by 50%. We'll get a call from Saluda, North Carolina. Good morning.
Morning.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, please.
I'm a native from a European country. I came over here in 1953, and my native country is today run by a coalition of secular Democrat socialists and Christian socialists. This might be incongruous to a lot of American people, but over there it has created practically the perfect political system, because the first ones who are basing everything on Marx and the second ones who are basing everything on the Sermon of the Mount found out they have quite a lot in common, with the exception that some go to church and the other ones don't. And they have the country today has the highest per capita spending income in the world. There is peace. The only bad thing about it is it's dull, because it's so good. And that's all I can say about it.
Thank you, caller.
Well, you know, he's right, and the interesting thing that he pointed to is the way in which people can come to the socialist idea from different traditions. Most people, you know, think that socialism is an atheistic movement, but there is a broad section of the religious community that espouses those values. There's a worldwide organization of religious socialists that meets every few years. So it's important to understand that socialism is not monolithic. It's not one little committee sending down orders that everybody follows.
Do you consider yourself a religious person?
No, I do not.
An email from Charlotte Walker of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. What is the position of the Democratic Socialist Party on the Kosovo War?
Well, there is division, actually, in our organization about Kosovo. Not division about the question of stopping ethnic cleansing, but division on the best way to do it. We're generally in favor of a international police force, preferably, from the UN, to go into this kind of conflict and settle it without any kind of question of ulterior motives. And that's the approach that we would prefer to take. We have called for a ceasefire based on a withdrawal of the Serbian military and paramilitary forces and the subsequent disarmament of the KLA. We've called for the return of all the refugees. We've opposed the bombing campaign in terms of the targeting of the Belgrade and other urban centers, and we've called for the introduction of an international force that includes significant non-NATO elements to protect all of the residents of Kosovo and ensure the autonomy of a democratically elected provincial government.
What is your background?
Well, I went to school at Ithaca High. I wasn't particularly political when I was in high school. In college, it was the time of the war in Vietnam. I became politicized. I had the good luck to be around some people who had a socialist background, so I could get a broader perspective. I joined the socialist movement in 1968. I did some work in Albany with a student group that I had helped to form. I was in the student government. And then in 1973, I moved to New York City. I worked with Michael Harrington, who was our founding chair, and many other people to help form the organization that eventually became DSA. I was on its staff for 9 years, and then in 1982 I left and formed my own business, which I've been doing ever since.
And that business is?
It's a graphic arts business.
Who are your political heroes?
Well, I think, well, Michael Harrington was certainly, somebody who influenced me a great deal. And after that...
Are there individuals in world history that you point to as role models, or those who espouse the beliefs that you and other members of DSA follow?
And nobody that I would put in the class of a hero. I mean, I think that you need people working together to do things. So I'm not really oriented towards, heroes and leaders and that sort of thing.
Pittsburgh, Kansas, for Frank Llewellyn. Good morning.
Morning, gentlemen. Frank, I think you're pretty close to my kind of guy. C-SPAN, would you let me quote a paragraph out of a letter to the editor I read yesterday?
Certainly, be glad to.
Minute.
What paper is it?
It was, it'd be in the Joplin Globe.
Uh-huh.
And just a paragraph, if you'll let me, please.
We'd be glad if you did that.
It says, when you flaunt luxury on television before so many of the have-nots in poverty, it's imperative that we will create a certain amount of animosity that harbors in them a feeling of being left out or ignored and deprived. And that feeling, if not controlled, may even result in what happened in Colorado. It says to control or to change those feelings, it must be necessary, therefore, to bring these have-nots and people that are in poverty into our society as respected and above that poverty and able to care for their family in a very dignified and respected manner. To continue, this is off ad lib here. Frank, I noticed you had the bug on your button there of the labor movement, and I'm very much in favor of that. I think that's one of the finest buttons that I've seen in a long time.
Thank you.
And I'd like to know what your idea is on minimum wage and how you would like to have that. And Social Security, by the way, is coming up. Why is it that notch babies are not considered to be repaired by the, you know what I mean there.
Yeah.
Caller, do you consider yourself political?
Sir?
Do you consider yourself political?
Very political.
And
yes.
which party are you a member of, if I may ask?
I'm a registered independent.
Uh-huh.
But I have I was Democrat for 50 years. I'm 75 now, and but I listen to your programs at least 6 hours a day on C-SPAN and CNN and so on. C-SPAN 2, mm-hmm. I watch everything on there. I spend
great.
probably 8 hours a day almost watching your segments. And so if you let me come back with a rebuttal on his comments of what I suggested.
Certainly. Frank Llewellyn.
Well, a couple things. We're for, high minimum wages, and actually we've done a lot of work along with a lot of other people on a new concept that people have called a living wage. There have been living wages campaigns in many cities. I think 22 cities have now adopted living wage legislation, which requires, usually what happens is the city is required to have its subcontractors pay significantly higher wages, $7.50 or $11 or $12 an hour, and sometimes they have programs where they're required to include health insurance. So we think that's actually a better concept than minimum wages, although we're for increases in the minimum wage. One of the things I think people don't realize is that here we are now 8 years into an economic recovery, and the benefits of that recovery have gone to a very small group of people. People are doing all right, but a lot of times it's because they're working more. I have a number here where the typical married couple with children work 247 more hours, nearly 6 weeks longer. in 1996 than 1989. The poverty rate has actually increased slightly in that same period. And if you look at, say, the share of wealth of the middle 20% of the population, which is kind of one measure of a middle class, well, that share has decreased from the 4.8 to 4.4%. So, you know, the idea that the stock market boom and is spreading benefits to everyone in society is not. It's just not a true picture. That's why you need things like minimum wages. That's why you need living wages. That's why we desperately need trade unions. And one of the greatest things that's going on right now is the new organizing that's going on in the trade union movement. They're just organizing all over the country. There was a election in Los Angeles 2 months ago where the service employees organized 75,000 home care workers. These are some of the lowest paid workers. And what was remarkable about that campaign is that there were 87,000 different work sites. That is, you've got workers who essentially go to somebody's home and perform care, and then they go to somebody else's home. So to reach that group of people and to win by a 20-to-1 margin, that's one of the indications that, you know, things are changing in this country. And that's a reason for people to be optimistic. You know, one of the reasons why this red baiting of us is going on is because the people on the right are recognizing that their old politics, the politics of anti-communism and tax cuts, doesn't work anymore. They don't really understand the country. They didn't understand impeachment. They lost seats in the House when they thought they were going to win 25 seats. They're now terribly divided on foreign policy. They're falling back into the old isolationism. So, you know, none of this means that there's going to be a new big period for the left, guaranteed. But it does mean that there's going to be, you know, politics and openings and a chance to do something, so that if people have been not doing something because they've been discouraged, now is the time to go out and get active and look for an organization, our organization or another organization. There are lots of organizations out there, and go out and make some change.
Caller, we have some other folks waiting, but did you want to briefly follow up?
Just real quickly, a question. Is it possible to ask some of the legislators, when you have them on, their justification for people above 72,000 not to have to contribute to the FICA, and also if they're going to do that, why don't they, let the guys that make under 30,000 not have to even contribute anything? That seems to me like that would equalize a little bit. And so thanks a lot for your attention this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you're right on Social Security too, sir.
Caller from Pittsburgh, Kansas. We'll move on to Fresno, California. Good morning.
Good morning, America. Good morning, Frank. Good morning to you, C-SPAN. I've got a few questions for Frank. What do you think of President Clinton, for one?
Well, you know, he's an elected official. You know, it's very strange. A lot of people on the right think that he's a liberal. He's not. He doesn't have a liberal political background. I mean, he's liberal on some social issues, but on economic issues, he's been, pro-corporate. That's really one of the strange things that's going on. You have this incredible vitriolic hatred of the president by people on the right, when, you know, he's closer probably to the Senate Republicans than he is to us.
Really about Clinton. It's just his ideals for America and where he's taken us, and the fact that the ends justify the means in any purpose to get what he wants is why he's there.
Well, you know, I'm not, you know, this is obviously one of those callers who has a very poor opinion of the president, I haven't seen anything that really says that he's an ends justify the means person. I've seen some things that are, you know, highly questionable and that I don't support, but I think that's an overstatement.
Frank Llewellyn is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. He's wearing the pin that has a handshake and a rose with a union label on the front of the pin. Fayetteville, Pennsylvania is next. Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning. Hello.
Hey, thank you, C-SPAN. Mr. Llewellyn, I heard your comment about the way I took it was a massive increases in taxes. I'm sorry. I always felt like get your hand out of my pocket. Now, when you say, I'll give you. You got some good idyllic ideas, but say perchance I'm anti-abortion. You raise my taxes. Well, right now I have to pay for clinics out there to be funded by the government. That's all I need is more taxes in a socialist theory. I totally disagree with it. It's against the law for me not to pay it, but it is the law that I go directly against my religion to pay for something. It's not right, and that's my big objection with taxes. Now, I've looked at your socialist theory. I've been to your website. It sounds good. On the cover, it sounds good, but when you get down to a human's true beliefs, then you got problems with people.
Well, I didn't really understand the last point, so let me address the points about taxation. First of all, there are many people who are overtaxed. The people in the top income brackets are undertaxed. So that's a very important point to understand. And it is true that you have to pay taxes. I know many people who are tax protesters who have not paid taxes over some issue that they believe very strongly of, and I respect their moral conviction, but I don't believe that they're right.
Waterbury, Connecticut. Good morning.
Hi, C-SPAN. You guys are great. You guys are well worth my $50 cable bill just to have your channel. But in any case, my question is, I noticed that Bernie Sanders considers himself a socialist, and I was just wondering what the differences were between your philosophies and his.
Thanks for the call.
Thank you. I don't think that there are any fundamental differences between Congressman Sanders and us. He's got independent next to his name, and he's determined to be independent of parties and organizations, and I respect that.
Orange, California. Hello.
How you doing?
Fine, thank you. Go ahead with your question.
My question is, I'd like to agree with him on health care. That's a good thing. I just don't want our government to be into us too much. But you're talking about taking the big companies and spreading the wealth a little bit, basically. What, if anything, can be done as far as like the Edison's companies? They say they are not a public service, but yet they hold everybody at bay. Basically, they're basically not terrorists, but they hold everybody so that you can't do anything. They shut your electricity off. Many people have been burned. Many children have been burned because of the Edison company coming in, shutting your electricity off. I have children, and the thing is that I fell off a company truck a while back. They came out, and you try to make arrangements with these people, and they don't want to make arrangements. And I'm not a political person, but the whole idea is to keep them from shutting you down, gas companies from shutting you off. They need to work with the American people.
Thanks for the call. We'll get a comment from Frank Llewellyn. Good morning.
Well, he's absolutely right. And, you know, that's an example of what, you know, an earlier caller was talking about when they seemed to feel that property rights were more important than human rights.
New York City. Hello.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to ask, I'm a socialist myself, democratic socialist. Wouldn't it be more cost efficient in terms of health costs to basically just when someone gets sick, have the government pay the bill for that rather than the current system, which is actually more expensive? And I just think that it would be wiser to have a fund set up where we can do away with all the middlemen and have education to prevent illness, and then when the person becomes, if a person becomes ill later in life or whatever, we could basically just, it would be cheaper, in other words, just to pay for that particular illness rather than every month, be charged so much money that's basically being stolen by corporate criminals and the like, and all the middlemen, and a root canal is $1,200 in New York City.
What about catastrophic or long-term care, though?
Well, I believe in socialized medicine. I used to live in Japan with my wife, and I went to the emergency room, and I brought a book thinking I'd be sitting there waiting for a long time. They came up and said, "How can we help you?" They never talked about money. And I don't see why, if they have it and most other industrial societies have it, why don't we have it? I think that there's something seriously wrong with that, and someone in the Congress must be being paid off by that lobby to keep us from having it. It just seems really unfair, and we should be outraged, and we should be joining the Socialist Party.
Okay, thank you.
Well, he's right about the money. If you think about, when he was first elected, there seemed to be a chance that President Clinton would provide some leadership on health care, and we might make some progress. And you have to think about the millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars and the Harry and Louise ads and all that the insurance companies spent to prevent any kind of change. And the problems in this country with the uninsured and poor health care continue. They're not improving. That's another thing about this recovery. The number of people with health insurance, it has not grown all that much. There's 7 million people in California without health insurance. And in state after state after state, the numbers are the same. So the shift to HMOs and cost containment has pushed the problem away a little bit, but it's coming back, and the country is going to have to do something. And the strange thing is that a national solution, a single-payer solution, will be cheaper for the society as a whole. So it's only private profit that's preventing our doing something on this. The country is really ready for this.
Comment from a viewer who says, "I'm a French citizen living in the United States. I still have difficulties to understand why any leftist thinking is so much demonized by the vast majority in this country." We got a call from Winslow, Maine. Good morning.
Good morning. I would like to ask the gentleman, how many members of the House of Representatives who belong to the Black Caucus, such as Maxine Waters, belongs to his organization?
Well, I answered this question already. About the members. There are 2 members. They both happen to be African American. Maxine Waters is not a member. She's somebody that we have worked with from time to time. I find it interesting that the caller wants to seek out the members and target the members of the African American caucus. Why is that worthy of some special mention, unless that's some, kind of new representation of ugly politics?
Austin, Texas, for Frank Llewellyn. Good morning.
Good morning. I noticed he was mentioning something about private property being a problem, and I've just had one of my latest scientific theories, learning as evolution, plagiarized by the media as if it were their own. And I was curious, is that private property and the right to intellectual property, should that be violated in order to break people's own minds and their ability to walk on their own ability in order to feed them into the slavery of not being able to use their own minds, as they are plagiarized and mocked by those in control, but yet the criminals who commit crimes on society are allowed fame as they're supposed to be, or the victims, but yet they plagiarize our minds. What's this?
Thank you, caller.
We're not in favor of plagiarism.
It's going to be the shorter answer we've ever had on this program. Mary in Indiana, good morning.
Hi.
Hello.
I enjoy C-SPAN.
We appreciate you watching.
I just think that we need to look at what's going on with the socialist countries right now, and see what that they've all fallen away from socialism and going to a democratic government, and then they're looking at it and embracing it, trying to think that it might be a good thing, and we need to be not trying to penalize people for making money, being industrialists and doing things. We might need to join things to help people that are down and out, but we certainly don't need to take our country into a position that other countries are running away from.
Well, the countries of Eastern Europe are not countries that I believe ever could be called socialist. They used the socialist rhetoric. Lots of people have used the socialist rhetoric, but they weren't democratic, and so they don't meet my definition. They didn't have very good economies. They didn't deliver goods for their people. It's not surprising in that respect that they didn't survive. Now, if you go to Western Europe, you see that the democratic socialist parties that we're affiliated with, the Labour Party, the French Socialist Party, the German Social Democratic Party, are in government, that their people have trusted them to manage what is a very difficult transition, that we're in right now. We have a situation in the world economy where no government by itself really has the power to regulate the behavior of corporations. And that's what we need to be moving towards.
From Carol and Bert Jennings of Florida, I note that Mr. Llewellyn states he either has or owns a graphic arts business in New York. Does he donate to charity or to nonprofit organizations a profit from his business that is over and above exactly what he needs on which to subside?
Well, close to it.
Rockville, Maryland, good morning.
Well, good morning. Nice to see someone on who has a brain and can think. I see a basic problem in this country, that is thousands of people out there, many of them your callers this morning, cannot distinguish between the ex-communist system and democratic socialism. Just a quick lesson here, communism and socialism are not the same thing. That's probably one of Mr. Llewellyn's points. The socialist regimes are not all falling all over Europe. Germany is alive and well. Denmark is alive and well. There can be socialist systems that are monarchies. There can be socialist systems that are established congressional-run countries, parliamentary countries like our own. It doesn't mean if you vote for or think socialistically that you are a naughty red communist. And I agree with the writer who wrote in the email, the Frenchman there, who finds it very, very hard to understand why Americans tend to demonize anything progressive in terms of socialism. If we looked at it and looked at the fact that European manufacturers and industrialists have been, since World War II, forced into standing up and paying for what they need to, not just raking in big profits the way they do here in the States, we would possibly understand that that's what needs to happen here.
Okay, thanks for the comment. Did you want to respond?
You're right, and if you visit our webpage, people will find links to the web pages of the socialist and social democratic and labor parties that are governing the Europe, so that you can learn firsthand about what they stand for. You don't have to take our word for it.
The key word, if you're on AOL, would be what?
You know, I have no idea how to get from AOL.
How about your address on the internet?
It's
I think we have it. It's www.dsausa.org. Conyers, Georgia is next. We've also, I think, hyperlinked it to our website. And if we haven't, maybe we can. Conyers, Georgia, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much, C-SPAN. I appreciate you having such a varied program. I have a comment that I wanted to make, which I would like to have Mr. Llewellyn comment on, too. It refers to this NATO summit meeting, because it just made my blood boil to see these people parading around in all their expensive cars and having red carpets rolled out for them, having fanfares played for them, having flags draped around. And while they're having a big dinner, people over there in Bosnia and Yugoslavia are starving. I would have liked to have seen them take that money and that was wasted on all of this big hocus pocus and use it for some refugee relief. And they could have given these delegates some bread and some soup and some water, so they'd appreciate what it's like to be a refugee. All they needed was Groucho Marx to come in there and parade up the red carpet while Harpo played the Zorgravian national anthem. And I'd appreciate Mr. Llewellyn's comment.
Thank you, caller. As we look at this picture from Newsweek magazine, what was referred to over the weekend as the class photo from inside the Mellon Auditorium.
Well, I think that there are a lot of wasted resources on pomp and ceremony that could be better spent. There are a lot of wasted resources in the military that could be better spent. You know, one of the things we all have to be careful about is that the expenditures related to this campaign in Kosovo are not used to, you know, hide and mask other increases to the military budget that aren't necessary.
Venice, Florida, good morning for Frank Llewellyn of the Democratic Socialists of America.
Frank, I don't believe you. I have before me right now, off of your website, 58 members of the Democratic Party that belong to the DSA. You sit there and say two. Would you like me to read them off?
You found their email address on our website.
These are members, sir. Members of the Progressive Caucus.
Well, they are members of the Progressive Caucus, but the Progressive Caucus is a congressional caucus. It's not, you know, it's something that we support. We're happy to see such a political development. We think that other people should know about that. That's why we put information related to it on our website. But the idea that a caucus of Congress is controlled by anybody but its members is just not a serious idea. And the idea that because you find a web address or an email address on a website that it means something political is not very sensible either. But, you know, maybe what we should do is we should put Trent Lott's address on our website and cause him some problems.
Boston, Massachusetts, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for C-SPAN. Mr. Llewellyn, could you comment on the Labour Party's in England's participation in large part in developing the policies that led to the war in Yugoslavia, and specifically, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Milosevic was indicted for war crimes earlier in the decade, and in any case, he had significant popular opposition to him for months at a time in the early 90s, and I don't remember anything in the way of Labour Party support for ousting him at that time.
Well, I think it's true that one of the problems with NATO being the entity that's intervening is that different NATO governments have had different roles at different times in policy there, and sometimes people have sought stability and have failed to support democratic oppositions. Certainly, there was a very vibrant democratic opposition in Serbia, and the bombing campaign has undermined that. Beyond that, I don't feel I'm in a position to comment on the particular role of particular governments in moving to this point, but I do think that we have to remember that something does have to be done about ethnic cleansing.
Our last call for Frank Llewellyn is from Orlando, Florida. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today? Thanks for C-SPAN. I was calling. I wanted to talk to Mr. Llewellyn in 1 second. Mr. Llewellyn, I wanted to call you because you have such a negative opinion of private business and what you expect companies should do and how they should be the great provider. But myself, having had 2 companies prior to my life and having a number of employees, I've been the one out there trying to create jobs and opportunities for workers. You yourself, unless I'm wrong, you haven't gone out and opened a business. You haven't had to pay people insurance. You haven't had to provide people, and you're the last guy to get paid on Friday as a small business guy. So those of us, thousands of people, millions probably, out there producing the jobs, the people taking the risks, the people investing their small capital, and about 80% of the businesses in America are small businesses. We're doing the part for workers. We're providing jobs. You're sitting here on your butt in New York City complaining the rest of us aren't doing enough work when you need to get out there and open a business for the others. Thank you very much.
Well, I've operated a business for 17 years. I've met a payroll, both in business and a nonprofit. So I'm sorry that you didn't understand that. The truth is that in this society, wealth, income, and power are not distributed in an even way. Our organization works to change that. If you want to be a part of that, you should visit our website. Call us on the telephone, get more information, make up your own mind.
Last question, because a lot of viewers may have tuned in the last half hour. We've been with you for almost an hour. What's next for DSA? Where's your organization going? You mentioned a fall convention that will be held, I believe, in November.
November 12th to 14th, we'll have our next national convention in San Diego. Politically, right now, we're focused on the issues related to privatization around Social Security, Medicare. We want to follow up on our work related to global trade. We think these are important issues. And we want to build the labor movement and strengthen the labor movement, because that's the way we think a strong labor movement leads to real change.
Frank Llewellyn of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.